In the heart of the wilderness, a silent tension lingers where human paths cross with nature's raw power. Grizzly bears, towering and territorial, can turn a peaceful trek into a fight for survival in mere seconds. Though not naturally aggressive, these creatures react with stunning force when startled or when protecting their young. Grizzly attacks are rare but unforgettable, swift, fierce, and often misunderstood. Unraveling the instincts behind these encounters reveals a more profound truth. Survival in the wild isn't about domination, but about respect for nature's untamed balance. In the remote wilderness of Ussuri-Krai, where the Russian-Chinese border carves through ancient forests, an experienced hunter named Alexander Rutsky met his fate in 2017. The region, known for its pristine taiga, had remained largely untouched by human development, preserving its rich biodiversity and dangerous predators that few outsiders encountered. Residents respected these forests with a mixture of reverence and fear, understanding the delicate balance between man and nature in this isolated corner of the world. Alexander Rutsky, a 34-year-old bow hunter from St. Petersburg, had traveled alone to this remote region despite warnings from locals. He had built a reputation among hunting circles for his skill and determination, having successfully hunted game across Russia's varied terrains. The Ussuri wilderness represented a new challenge for him, a place where he could test his abilities against the Manchurian wapiti, a prized elk species native to the region. Rutsky's journey began on October 15th, when he arrived at a small settlement near the hunting grounds. The local hunters gathered at the village's only tavern that evening, sharing stories of recent animal sightings. When the conversation turned to warnings about a particularly aggressive Russian grizzly bear that had been spotted near logging operations the previous week, Rutsky merely shrugged off their concerns. He reportedly told the gathered men that he had encountered bears before and knew how to avoid trouble. The locals described the bear as an unusually large male, likely approaching the end of its life, a dangerous combination that made the animal both powerful and unpredictable. Viktor Nemovsky, an experienced local guide who would later become the key witness to the tragedy, recalled trying to convince Rutsky to hire him as a companion. Rutsky declined, insisting he preferred to hunt alone. He did, however, agree to meet Viktor at predetermined locations every 2 days to check in, a decision that would later prove crucial in documenting what happened. For the first 3 days, Rutsky's hunt proceeded without incident. He set up a small camp near a stream and spent his days tracking wapiti through the dense forest. According to the journal found among his belongings, he had spotted several promising specimens, but hadn't yet seen the trophy-sized elk he sought. On the morning of the 4th day, Rutsky noted in his final journal entry that he had discovered fresh elk tracks and planned to follow them deeper into the forest. What Rutsky didn't realize was that these tracks led dangerously close to an area where the notorious bear had recently made a kill. The bear, following instincts, had partially buried its prey, a wild boar, to hide it from scavengers. This cache was hidden beneath a tangle of fallen trees and brush, invisible to the human eye, until one was practically standing on it. According to Viktor's later statement to authorities, he had arranged to meet Rutsky that afternoon at a designated clearing about 2 miles from where Rutsky had last camped. When the hunter didn't appear at the appointed time, Viktor decided to track him, following the obvious trail Rutsky had left through the underbrush. The experienced local guide moved quietly through the forest, eventually hearing a commotion ahead. Crashing branches, a guttural animal roar, and a man's terrified shout. Viktor crept forward until he could see into a small clearing. There he witnessed the massive bear charging from the dense underbrush toward Rutsky, who had just enough time to knock an arrow and release it at the oncoming predator. The arrow struck, but did little to slow the enraged animal. The bear closed the distance in seconds, knocking Rutsky to the ground with a powerful swipe of its paw. Terrified, and knowing he could do nothing against such a predator, Viktor retreated silently before running back toward the village to summon help. As he fled, he heard Rutsky's emergency beacon begin its electronic ping, a last desperate act that would ultimately lead rescuers to the gruesome scene. The local ranger service organized a search party immediately, but it took nearly 3 hours to reach the remote location. By then, twilight was falling over the forest. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The clearing showed signs of a violent struggle, shredded equipment, Rutsky's destroyed compound bow snapped in two, and deep claw marks scoring several nearby trees. Following a trail of disturbed earth and blood, the rangers discovered Rutsky's body partially buried beneath a pile of dirt and forest debris about 50 yards from where the attack began. The medical examiner later determined that Rutsky had died from massive trauma and blood loss. The bear, following its instinct to protect its food cache, had attempted to add Rutsky to its hidden larder. Rangers tracking the animal discovered the original wild boar kill just yards from where Rutsky had been attacked. The bear was never found, despite an extensive search in the following weeks. Local hunters theorized it had crossed into Chinese territory, where the forests provided even more isolation from human contact. In the aftermath, Viktor Namovsky became an advocate for safer hunting practices in the region. He often recounted the story to visitors, emphasizing that the Ussuri forest had not claimed Rutsky out of malice, but because the hunter had failed to heed local knowledge and respect the wilderness on its terms. The area where Rutsky died was subsequently marked with a small wooden memorial, a silent reminder of the thin line between man's confidence and nature's indifference. Alexander Rutsky's story serves as a cautionary tale in Russian hunting circles, a reminder that even the most experienced outdoors people must approach the wilderness with humility and respect, especially in regions where humans are still visitors in territories still ruled by ancient predators. The rugged wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska, had long attracted nature enthusiasts seeking to experience its pristine beauty and observe its famous inhabitants, the massive Kodiak bears. In 2013, this allure drew Carolyn Peterson, a 26-year-old wildlife photographer from Seattle, Washington, to its shores. The island, spanning over 3,500 square miles and home to approximately 3,500 Kodiak bears, represented the pinnacle of wilderness adventure for someone with Peterson's passion for untamed landscapes. Peterson arrived in early June, timing her visit with the salmon run that drew bears to the island's rivers and streams. She had meticulously planned her trip for months, researching bear behavior and safety protocols. Despite her preparation, nothing could fully prepare her for the encounter that would change her life forever. After spending her first 3 days photographing the island's coastal areas from designated viewing platforms, Peterson decided to venture along one of the lesser-traveled trails near Karluk Lake, known for its abundant salmon population. The weather that morning, June 12, was unusually clear for the normally foggy island, providing perfect conditions for wildlife photography. Peterson set out at dawn, carrying her camera equipment, bear spray, and a small backpack with provisions. The trail followed a meandering path alongside a shallow tributary, where salmon struggled to swim against the current upstream. Peterson stopped frequently to photograph the landscape and wildlife, carefully scanning the surroundings for any signs of bears. By mid-morning, she had captured stunning images of eagles, otters, and the occasional distant glimpse of bears fishing further upstream. Around 11:30 a.m., Peterson rounded a bend in the trail that brought her within view of a small clearing beside the stream. Initially, she failed to notice the young male Kodiak bear, partially obscured by tall grass approximately 50 yards ahead. The bear had been fishing in the shallow waters and had just emerged onto the bank with a salmon in its jaws when Peterson appeared. Park rangers would later determine that several critical factors contributed to what happened next. The wind direction that morning carried Peterson's scent away from the bear, meaning it had no warning of her approach. Additionally, the noise of the rushing stream had masked her footsteps. When she finally spotted the bear and froze in her tracks, the sudden appearance of a human startled the young Kodiak. The bear dropped its fish and charged without hesitation. Peterson, despite her training, instinctively turned to run, a reaction wildlife experts consistently warn against. Her panicked flight triggered the bear's predatory response, causing it to accelerate its charge. Within seconds, the massive animal closed the distance between them. Peterson later recalled to park officials that she could hear the bear's labored breathing behind her moments before she felt its presence. When she glanced back, she lost her footing on the uneven trail and tumbled to the ground. The bear was upon her instantly. The first strike of its paw caught Peterson's right thigh, its claws tearing through her hiking pants and into her flesh. The pain was described as instantaneous and overwhelming, like being hit with both fire and electricity simultaneously. As she screamed, the bear swung again, this time catching her backpack, which likely saved her from more serious injury. In what Peterson later credited as the decision that saved her life, she managed to roll behind a large boulder at the trail's edge. The partial barrier confused the bear momentarily, giving Peterson precious seconds to retrieve her bear spray from its holster on her belt. When the bear circled the boulder, she discharged the spray directly into its face. The Kodiak recoiled from the burning sensation, backing away several feet while shaking its massive head. It remained in the vicinity for what Peterson estimated was about 5 minutes, pacing and occasionally approaching before ultimately retreating into the surrounding brush. Severely injured and losing blood from the deep lacerations on her leg, Peterson activated her emergency beacon and applied pressure to her wounds using supplies from her first aid kit. The response from the island's emergency services was swift, but challenging due to the remote location. A helicopter rescue team reached her approximately 90 minutes after the attack. Medical professionals in a community hospital in Kodiak treated Peterson for 4 deep lacerations, requiring over 60 stitches, significant tissue damage, and shock. Remarkably, she sustained no broken bones or life-threatening injuries, an outcome doctors attributed to her quick thinking and the partial protection offered by the boulder. During her recovery, Peterson learned that the bear responsible was likely a 3-year-old male that had recently been separated from its mother, at an age when it was still learning to hunt efficiently and establish its territory. Its behavior was consistent with a defensive rather than predatory attack, explaining why it retreated after the initial confrontation. The experience transformed Peterson's relationship with wilderness. 6 months after the attack, she founded the Wilderness Awareness Initiative, an organization dedicated to educating outdoor enthusiasts about wildlife safety. Her presentations frequently featured photographs of her scars alongside images she had captured before the attack. Peterson often told audiences during her educational talks that the scars reminded her daily that humans were merely visitors in the animal's home. She emphasized that respect meant understanding they could never fully predict or control wild animals, but only prepare and act wisely in their presence. By 2019, Peterson had returned to wildlife photography, though she no longer hiked alone in bear country. Her experience on Kodiak Island became a powerful teaching tool for wilderness safety instructors across North America. At the same time, her advocacy work helped secure additional funding for bear management programs in Alaska's national parks. The trail where Peterson was attacked now features enhanced warning signage and a bear awareness station where hikers can review safety protocols before proceeding, a small but significant legacy of her encounter with one of North America's most magnificent and dangerous predators. In the summer of 2009, the pristine wilderness of a national park in the northwest corner of Wyoming became the setting for a tragic encounter between man and nature. The park, established in 1872 as America's first national park, spans over 2.2 million acres across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, and is home to one of the densest grizzly bear populations in the continental United States. This particular section, known for its remote geological features and diverse wildlife, had drawn the attention of James O'Connor, a 36-year-old geologist from a university in Colorado. O'Connor had received a grant to study changes in soil composition near geothermal features, work that required venturing into less traveled areas of the park. His research assistant, Marcus Reed, a 29-year-old doctoral candidate, accompanied him on what was scheduled to be a 2-week expedition. The pair had obtained all necessary permits and attended the mandatory safety briefings, where park rangers emphasized the importance of bear awareness in the backcountry. On July 17th, their 5th day in the field, O'Connor and Reed established a temporary research site approximately 4 miles from the nearest marked trail. The location offered valuable data points where shifting geothermal activity had altered soil chemistry over the past decade. The morning began routinely, with O'Connor collecting soil samples while Reed set up monitoring equipment nearby. The men maintained their habit of regular communication via 2-way radios and had positioned their bear spray canisters within easy reach, standard protocols for scientists working in grizzly country. Around 10:45 a.m., according to Reed's later statement to park authorities, the pair separated by about 100 yards as O'Connor followed a promising soil gradient into a small ravine. The dense vegetation and natural contours created a situation where the men lost visual contact, yet remained within radio range. Reed recalled hearing O'Connor's excited voice on the radio, describing unusual mineral deposits just minutes before the attack. What neither man realized was that the ravine O'Connor had entered contained a partially consumed elk carcass, likely the kill of a large male grizzly that had been active in the area. Park biologists later estimated the bear had made the kill approximately 3 days earlier and had covered it with dirt and vegetation. This common practice allows bears to return to their kills over several days. O'Connor, focused on collecting samples, inadvertently approached within yards of this cache. The first indication of trouble came when Reed heard shouting through the radio, followed by a series of crashes and a roar that was audible even without the radio's assistance. Reed immediately abandoned his equipment and ran toward his colleague's location, calling O'Connor's name repeatedly. Upon reaching the ravine's edge, Reed witnessed the massive grizzly, later estimated to weigh over 600 pounds, already engaged in its attack. O'Connor had been knocked to the ground, his sample collection kits scattered around him. Reed observed his colleague attempting to deploy his bear spray, but the canister was knocked from his hand in the bear's initial assault. The grizzly's powerful jaws clamped onto O'Connor's shoulder, shaking him violently while its claws inflicted devastating injuries to his torso. Reed, displaying remarkable courage, discharged his bear spray from the ravine's edge while shouting to distract the animal. The spray's cloud drifted toward the bear, causing it to release O'Connor and turn toward this new threat briefly. This momentary distraction allowed Reed to scramble down the slope toward his injured colleague. The bear retreated approximately 30 yards, but continued to watch intently, huffing and pacing, behavior that wildlife experts would later identify as territorial defense rather than predatory interest. Reed reached O'Connor and assessed his grievous injuries. The geologist was conscious but severely mauled, with catastrophic wounds to his shoulder, chest, and abdomen. Despite Reed's frantic first aid attempts, O'Connor's condition deteriorated rapidly. Using their emergency satellite phone, Reed contacted the park's emergency services at 11:03 a.m. and provided their GPS coordinates and a description of the situation. The grizzly remained in the vicinity, occasionally approaching before retreating, a behavior pattern that forced Reed to discharge his bear spray twice more during the agonizing 78-minute wait for help. By the time the park's emergency helicopter located the site, O'Connor had lost consciousness. Despite the rescue team's immediate medical intervention, O'Connor was pronounced dead during the flight to the trauma center in Bozeman. The medical examiner's report cited exsanguination and traumatic organ damage as the causes of death. In the investigation that followed, wildlife biologists determined that the bear was a 12-year-old male, known as bear number 211 in the park's monitoring program. Trail cameras had documented this bear's increasing territorial behavior in recent seasons, though it had no previous history of human encounters. Following established park policy for cases involving human fatalities, officials made the difficult decision to locate and euthanize bear number 211, which they accomplished 3 days after the incident. The soil samples O'Connor collected that day, which were recovered from the site and analyzed by his colleagues, ultimately contributed to important research on the geothermal impacts on microbial ecosystems, work that was published posthumously with O'Connor as the lead author. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Marcus Reed became an advocate for enhanced safety protocols for scientific fieldwork in bear country, including mandatory use of portable electric fences around research sites and implementation of 3-person minimum teams. The location of the attack was permanently closed to research activities, though the park established a memorial scholarship in O'Connor's name for geology students focusing on conservation-minded research. Park rangers now include O'Connor's story in their safety briefings, emphasizing that even experienced outdoors people with proper equipment can find themselves in life-threatening situations when wild animals defend their territory and resources. The incident serves as a somber reminder of the unpredictable nature of wildlife encounters and the inherent risks of studying pristine wilderness up close. The dense forests surrounding the Ussuri River in eastern Siberia had witnessed human presence for millennia, but even in 2021 they remained largely wild and unforgiving. The region, characterized by its rugged terrain, extreme seasonal temperature fluctuations, and remarkable biodiversity, had long been revered by the indigenous populations who understood its dangers. Located approximately 60 kilometers from Khabarovsk, the area had recently become popular among urban families, seeking to escape the confines of city life during the pandemic, a trend that would lead to tragedy for one Moscow family. The Sorokina family, parents Mikhail and Yelena, along with their teenage daughters Irina, 16, and Alina, 14, had arrived at the Taiga Vista campground on July 12th for a 2-week wilderness vacation. The family had limited outdoor experience, having previously confined their nature excursions to supervised tours in established recreational areas near Moscow. The Ussuri wilderness represented their most ambitious adventure to date, prompted by pandemic-related travel restrictions that had eliminated their original plans for a European holiday. Campground manager Dmitry Volkov later recalled warning all new arrivals about recent bear sightings in the area, specifically mentioning an unusually large male Ussuri brown bear, commonly known as the Russian Grizzly, that had been observed at the forest edge on 3 occasions the previous week. He instructed guests to store food properly, make noise while hiking, and remain on designated trails. Standard precautions in bear country that the Sorokina family acknowledged but fatefully did not fully comprehend. During their first 2 days at the campsite, the family followed safety guidelines, staying together and limiting their exploration to the established hiking paths. On the 3rd day, however, the parents decided to relax at the campsite, allowing their daughters to explore a nearby meadow area visible from their tent. The girls, like many teenagers of their generation, had been documenting their wilderness adventure on social media, particularly on TikTok, where Irina had accumulated a modest following. According to data later recovered from Irina's smartphone, the girls spent approximately 40 minutes filming short videos in the meadow, before venturing closer to the forest edge, beyond their parents' line of sight. The phone's location tracking showed them moving progressively deeper into the woods, presumably in search of more dramatic backdrops for their videos. At around 2:17 p.m., Irina recorded what would become the final complete video on her device. In it, she can be heard telling her younger sister that she had spotted what appeared to be a bear approximately 100 meters away, partially obscured by berry bushes. Rather than retreating, Irina issued a dare to Alina, challenging her to approach closer to get footage that would go viral. The video ends with Alina reluctantly agreeing and walking toward the bear's location, while Irina remains behind to film the encounter. Forensic analysis of the smartphone and subsequent witness statements helped investigators reconstruct what happened next. Alina, apparently attempting to capture footage of herself with the bear in the background, approached to within approximately 20 meters of the animal. The Ussuri brown bear, a massive male later estimated to weigh over 700 pounds, had initially seemed preoccupied with feeding on wild berries. When Alina inadvertently stepped on a dry branch, it created a loud snap, and the bear's demeanor changed instantly. The final fragmented video recovered from Irina's damaged phone captures just 3 seconds of footage. The bear charging directly toward the camera position before the recording ends abruptly. Investigators believe this indicates the moment Irina realized the danger and attempted to flee. From the campsite, parents Mikhail and Yelena Sorokina heard screaming approximately 20 minutes after losing visual contact with their daughters. Mikhail immediately ran toward the forest edge, calling park rangers via his mobile phone as he searched for the girls. Arriving at the scene approximately 6 minutes after hearing the screams, he found Irina hiding behind a fallen tree in a state of shock. Alina's body was discovered 30 meters away, having sustained catastrophic injuries consistent with a bear attack. Despite Mikhail's frantic attempts at first aid and the rapid arrival of emergency services, she was pronounced dead at the scene. Wildlife experts who examined the site determined that the bear had likely perceived Alina's approach as a threat to its feeding territory, triggering a defensive attack that proved fatal. In the aftermath, park rangers organized a tracking team that located and euthanized the bear responsible the following day. The examination confirmed that it was an older male with worn teeth and a deteriorating condition, factors that may have contributed to its defensive reaction, as aging bears often become more aggressive when protecting food sources. The Sorokina family returned to Moscow immediately following the tragedy, where Irina required extensive therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. 6 months after the incident, she began speaking publicly about wilderness safety and the dangers of seeking fame on social media through risky behavior. Her testimony became an integral part of a new educational program implemented across Russian schools, warning teenagers about the potential consequences of documenting dangerous activities for online validation. The campground underwent significant changes in the wake of the incident, implementing mandatory safety briefings with signed acknowledgments, establishing clearer boundaries for guest activities, and installing additional warning signage throughout the property. Local conservation authorities also revised their protocols for monitoring and managing bear activity in recreational areas. The tragedy at the Ussuri River serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly wilderness encounters can turn deadly, particularly when humans fail to respect the unpredictable nature of wild animals. Wildlife experts continue to emphasize that even apparently docile bears remain powerful predators with complex territorial instincts, a reality that no social media opportunity should ever obscure. The rural district of Chandrapur in Maharashtra, India, had long maintained an uneasy coexistence with its wild inhabitants. In 2015, this mountainous region, known for its dense forests and diverse wildlife, continued to represent one of the few remaining corridors where humans and large predators shared boundaries in the increasingly crowded subcontinent. Situated approximately 150 kilometers from Nagpur, the area supported traditional agricultural practices while bordering protected forest lands that housed tigers, leopards, and the often overlooked but equally dangerous sloth bears. Anirudh Patel, a 32-year-old farmer, had lived his entire life in the small village of Moharli, located just 3 kilometers from the forest edge. Like many residents, Patel understood the rhythms of the wilderness and the precautions necessary when venturing near the forest boundary. His family had cultivated the same 10 acres for 3 generations, growing rice, cotton, and vegetables on land that once belonged entirely to the wilderness. October 14th began as an ordinary day for Patel. Having completed his morning work in the fields, he set out in the afternoon to collect firewood from a designated area where villagers were permitted to gather deadfall. The Forest Department had established these zones specifically to reduce illegal timber cutting while providing local communities with necessary resources. The arrangement generally worked well, though wildlife encounters occasionally occurred. The weather that day was unusually warm for mid-October, with temperatures reaching 35 degrees Celsius by early afternoon. Wildlife experts would later suggest that the unseasonal heat may have altered typical animal behavior patterns, driving creatures to seek food and water at times when they would normally remain inactive. As Patel made his way along a familiar path with his wooden handcart, he maintained the habit of periodically making noise, singing folk songs and occasionally striking his axe handle against trees, a practice villagers employed to warn wildlife of human presence. After collecting several armloads of fallen branches approximately 1 kilometer from the village boundary, Patel began navigating through a particularly dense section of underbrush that connected to the more open path leading homeward. Village elders would later note that this transitional zone between deep forest and human settlement often attracted wildlife seeking both cover and food opportunities. Unknown to Patel, a female sloth bear had been foraging in precisely this area, using her elongated snout and powerful claws to dig up termite mounds and search for tubers. Sloth bears, despite their misleading name suggesting sluggishness, are agile and powerful animals with poor eyesight but an exceptional sense of smell. This particular bear, approximately 7 years old based on later examination, had 2 cubs foraging nearby, a detail that proved critically important to what followed. As Patel rounded a blind corner created by a dense bamboo thicket, he suddenly found himself less than 10 meters from the adult bear. According to his subsequent account, he froze immediately upon spotting the animal, following standard advice for unexpected wildlife encounters. However, a sudden gust of wind carried his scent directly to the bear, which responded by rising to its hind legs, a characteristic posture that sloth bears use to assess potential threats better. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. Rather than retreating as Patel hoped, the bear dropped to all fours and charged without warning. Wildlife biologists suggest that the proximity of her cubs, though not immediately visible to Patel, likely triggered her aggressive defensive response. Sloth bears are notorious for their fierce protection of their young, often reacting more aggressively than even tigers when they perceive threats to their offspring. The bear covered the short distance between them in seconds. Patel attempted to scramble behind his handcart, but was knocked to the ground by the bear's first charge. He later described feeling like being hit by a motorcycle as the 120-kilogram animal struck him. The bear's 5-inch claws tore through his cotton shirt and into his left arm and side as he raised his arms protectively. The searing pain stunned him momentarily as he tried to curl into a defensive ball, an instinctive response that possibly saved his life. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, according to Patel's estimate, though to him it felt vastly longer. After delivering several slashing blows, the bear suddenly retreated, perhaps responding to distress calls from her cubs or simply determining that the threat had been neutralized. Through a haze of pain, Patel watched as the bear disappeared into the same thicket from which she had emerged. Bleeding profusely from deep lacerations, Patel managed to stand and begin walking toward the village, abandoning his cart and firewood. He had traveled approximately 300 meters when Vikram Naik, a fellow villager also collecting firewood, heard his calls for help and rushed to his assistance. Naik later recounted that Patel remained conscious but was growing weaker from blood loss by the minute. With Naik's support, Patel managed to reach the village where first aid was administered and then was transported to the district hospital in Chandrapur. Medical examination revealed 4 deep lacerations on his arm requiring 27 stitches, 3 gashes on his side, and significant bruising across his torso. Remarkably, he had sustained no life-threatening internal injuries, a fortune doctors attributed to his quick defensive reaction and the bear's abbreviated attack. During his recovery, Patel worked with Forest Department officials to document the encounter, helping wildlife managers better understand bear behavior in the region. His detailed account led to the implementation of enhanced warning systems in firewood collection areas, including regular patrols during cub-rearing seasons when female bears exhibit heightened defensive aggression. 6 months after the attack, Patel had regained most function in his injured arm, though prominent scars remained as permanent reminders of his brush with death. He returned to farming and occasional firewood collection, but with a newfound respect for the forest's dangers. When speaking about the incident to visitors or journalists, he emphasized that the bear was simply protecting her territory and young, actions any parent would understand. The encounter became a valuable teaching example in local wildlife awareness programs, illustrating how quickly unexpected meetings between humans and wild animals can escalate, especially when cubs are present. Forest officials note that Patel's case represents one of the fortunate outcomes in such situations, a survivable lesson in coexistence that continues to inform wildlife management practices in this unique intersection of human and animal domains. The national park, along U.S. Highway 441, which straddles the border between Tennessee and North Carolina, has long been one of America's most beloved natural treasures. Established in 1934 and encompassing over 522,000 acres of ancient mountains and old-growth forests, the park attracts millions of visitors annually who come to experience its remarkable biodiversity and breathtaking landscapes. In 2019, these same mountains became the backdrop for a harrowing survival story that would forever change how one avid hiker approached wilderness adventures. Tara Jennings, a 29-year-old environmental consultant from Asheville, North Carolina, had explored the park's trails dozens of times over the previous decade. Having completed most of the park's popular routes, she had recently begun seeking more isolated paths that offered solitude and opportunities to observe wildlife undisturbed by the crowds that frequented the main thoroughfares. On September 17th, she set out on the Appalachian Trail with plans to divert onto the less-traveled Grassy Branch Trail, a challenging 7.8-mile loop that park statistics showed saw fewer than 20 hikers on a typical weekday. The weather conditions that morning were ideal for hiking. Clear skies with temperatures in the mid-60s. Jennings had packed appropriately, carrying water, high-energy snacks, a first aid kit, and a satellite communicator for emergencies. She had also reviewed recent bear activity reports posted at the trailhead, noting that several black bear sightings had been reported in the area during the previous week. As a precaution, she carried a bear spray canister on her hip belt, a safety measure she had never needed to use in her years of hiking. According to the detailed account Jennings later provided to park rangers, she had completed approximately 4 miles of her planned route, when she paused near a small stream crossing to photograph wildflowers. The location, situated in a narrow valley flanked by dense rhododendron thickets, featured limited visibility beyond the immediate trail corridor. Jennings recalled hearing rustling sounds from the underbrush, but initially dismissed them as squirrels or other small mammals. As she prepared to continue her hike, Jennings rounded a sharp bend in the trail and suddenly found herself approximately 30 feet from a black bear sow with 2 cubs. The cubs, appearing to be spring-born and therefore only a few months old, were playing near a fallen log while their mother foraged nearby. The encounter was precisely the situation wildlife experts warn hikers to avoid: a mother bear with vulnerable young offspring. Jennings immediately recognized the danger and began to back away slowly, avoiding direct eye contact with the adult bear. She later reported that her initial retreat seemed effective, with the mother bear appearing more alert but not immediately aggressive. However, the situation deteriorated rapidly when one of the cubs, perhaps startled by Jennings' movement, scrambled up a nearby tree while emitting distress vocalizations. The mother bear's response was immediate and ferocious. Dropping the berries she had been consuming, she charged toward Jennings with surprising speed. Despite Jennings's attempt to ready her bear spray, the animal closed the distance too quickly, covering approximately 30 feet in seconds. Jennings turned and attempted to climb a nearby oak tree, a decision she later acknowledged was instinctive but contrary to recommended bear encounter protocols. The bear reached her before she could climb more than a few feet, striking her left leg with sufficient force to pull her from the tree. Jennings fell heavily, striking her head on an exposed root and momentarily losing clear awareness of her surroundings. The bear delivered a powerful bite to her upper thigh before releasing her and circling, huffing loudly, a behavior consistent with a defensive rather than a predatory attack. In that moment of crisis, Jennings recalled her wilderness first aid training and immediately implemented the recommended response to a defensive bear attack. She curled into a fetal position, protected her neck with her arms, and remained motionless. This playing dead technique, while difficult to execute under extreme stress, proved crucial to her survival. After what Jennings estimated was approximately 3 minutes of the bear circling and occasionally prodding her with its snout, the animal gradually lost interest and retreated to gather her cubs. Remaining motionless for several additional minutes after the bear family departed, Jennings eventually assessed her injuries. The primary wound, a deep puncture and tear on her left thigh, was bleeding significantly. Using supplies from her first aid kit, she applied direct pressure followed by a pressure bandage. Her satellite communicator provided her exact coordinates as she triggered its SOS function. Despite her injuries, Jennings recognized that remaining at the attack site risked another encounter if the bears returned. She began slowly making her way back toward the main trail, covering approximately half a mile over 90 difficult minutes before her strength began to fail. Finding a relatively open area with good visibility, she decided to wait for rescue rather than risk further exertion and blood loss. The park's emergency response team received her distress signal at around 1:17 p.m. and dispatched rangers immediately. Helicopter evacuation was deemed necessary due to the remote location and nature of her injuries. By 3:02 p.m., approximately 2 hours after the attack, a rescue helicopter located Jennings and airlifted her to a medical center in Knoxville. Medical assessment revealed that Jennings had sustained significant tissue damage to her thigh, requiring surgical repair, a mild concussion, and various minor lacerations and contusions. Remarkably, no major blood vessels or nerves had been severed, a circumstance doctors attributed to the defensive rather than predatory nature of the attack. After 3 surgeries and 16 days of hospitalization, Jennings began what would become an 8-month rehabilitation process. During her recovery, Jennings worked with park biologists to document her experience, providing detailed information that contributed to the park's wildlife management strategies. The bear involved was never specifically identified, as park policy generally does not require the removal of bears involved in defensive attacks when humans inadvertently surprise them or come between mothers and cubs. By June 2020, Jennings had recovered sufficiently to return to hiking, although she had made significant changes to her approach to wilderness exploration. She began organizing educational workshops for hiking groups, emphasizing proper bear awareness techniques and the importance of hiking with companions in areas where bear activity is known to occur. Her story became a powerful teaching tool in the park's visitor education programs. Today, a small marker near the location of her encounter serves as a reminder to hikers of the importance of wildlife awareness in the backcountry. Jennings herself continues to advocate for coexistence with wildlife, often noting that her survival was not merely due to luck, but to the implementation of proper techniques in a crisis. Knowledge she now works tirelessly to share with others who venture into North America's bear country.